Hello my people with thick asses but even thicker hearts. What is up? Today I want to share with you some of my favorite books. Now, as you may or may not know, I work in a bookstore and have been working in bookstores for the last 4 to 5 years. So it's literally my job to find amazing literature. As an author myself, I know how difficult it can be to market and debut your works, so I personally try to look for small and independent businesses and people, and it's actually turned out to be extremely successful. One of the most common compliments we get at the bookstore is that our collection is eclectic and filled with books people have never read before. In addition, I'm frequently in contact with the publishers that create the books you read, so I kind of get the inside scoops on things that are yet to be released, and I often get to actually read the manuscripts before they're in their final print. And of course, most of my friends are readers as well, so whatever they recommend me, I'm gonna read too. The 8 books I selected today to share with you are all compiled from those 3 components. To start off, I'll tell you about 4 of my favorite fiction books and then 4 nonfiction ones. First up is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Vuong. The protagonist of this novel goes by Little Dog, and it's about his migrant and queer trauma in relation to his mother and how she affects both. I've recommended this book to a lot of people already, and every single person has liked it. Most have told me though they've cried their eyes out by the end. Personally, it didn't emotionally destroy me like that, and I'm not sure if it's because I looked at it less as a tragedy and more as something I related to. My own grandparents immigrated to Canada, and I've grown up seeing how their own cultural differences and migrant struggles have affected my parents and me, and what Vuong writes about is very parallel to what I've witnessed, and I'm queer as well, and there's been a struggle with that within my migrant family. I didn't cry my eyes out, but this is probably one of my new favorite novels ever. It is written like one whole ass poem. Like, it is so beautiful. I was genuinely going through a literary crisis continually while reading this because every sentence he wrote was so impactful that I was starting to become insecure and doubt my own writing skill. Genuinely, while reading it, I was like, am I like nothing? Am I a terrible writer? Because this is top tier. On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous is so beautifully written, and the story is so fluid and raw and authentic. One of the thoughts I had by the end of the novel was that this could very easily be a biography. It's truly like witnessing someone's life through the worst but also most impactful moments. Next up, we have Blood and Guts in High School by Acker. One of the things I was most shocked to find out about this book was that it was written in 1978, because it already feels ahead of the times right now. It starts off with a young girl about 11 or 12 and her relationship to her father, who is also her boyfriend. He is a predator and sexual abuser, but for a young girl who doesn't have anyone else in her life, her dad is still her anchor. And it starts off with their relationship and her dad then finding an actual woman to sleep with and kicking her to the streets. And so the novel presumes as a 12-year-old girl who has to sell her body on the streets of New York in order to live. This book will make you angry, and it will make you upset, and it will make you confront a lot of the issues we have within our world right now. I know for myself it was actually really triggering for me to read, and I didn't know what I was getting into because this book was recommended to me by a coworker who didn't know the own experiences I endured similar to her, but despite it being triggering, it was so necessary for me to read. As I said earlier, I'm an author myself, and I have 2 poetry books. The first one I ever published is called Youth, the second one is Screaming Sweet Nothings. Now, Screaming Sweet Nothings is sad, like that's the best way to describe it. It is 95% not happy, and that is because I wrote it in one of the worst times in my life. And while this moment was going on for me, this book was recommended. I was heavily influenced to write my own experience with assault and sexual assault because of this book. It made me look at myself in a way of, yeah, maybe nobody does want to hear about this stuff, but it still happened. Because that's exactly how this main character is. It is all just tragic, but yet here it is, you know? I think it's necessary for people to look at lives like that sometimes. And on top of the story just being phenomenal, the way this was written, just as a quick glimpse, goes from a novel to brutal ass drawings to poetry and ends with a play. It includes all stylistic types of writing within a story and doesn't deter it. Like, it genuinely enhances the story being written in such a convoluted and abstract way. So yeah, out of all the books I'm recommending, this one is the most brutal, but I would say also the one that I thought about longest after finishing it. Next up, I am super excited to share this one with you. It is Bronte Purtell's 100 Boyfriends. I'm not gonna lie to you, I finished this book yesterday, but it is on this list. It is so good, but I also think it could be off-putting to people who like very specific kinds of genre, such as fantasy or non-romance, or people who are extremely straight. 100 Boyfriends is exactly what the title suggests. It is about this guy's connection to many different men. Part of why I would say you wouldn't like this if you are an extreme fantasy, non-romance, and/or extremely straight kind of person is because there is no scene setting in this book. It is very hard to tell where he is with these kinds of men. It is just their conversations and their thoughts together. There is also a lot of sex. This book is mostly sex scenes, so I don't think it's for everyone, but personally, I fucking love this. There are huge oof moments throughout this book. He has very poetic and striking lines, many of which left me so conflicted. Some I found completely relatable, things I've thought before too. And other things I was like, why would you say that about someone else? Like, I was empathizing with the receiving end of what he was saying, right? But it didn't make me dislike the book. It made me more curious about it. If you are also queer, you likely have very complex dynamics to your friendships of whom are also queer. It can be so much more difficult to navigate, having both platonic and romantic love existing at the same time. And I think this book does an amazing job at representing that. He reflects a lot on his friends that he has sex with, but doesn't date, and how that can be a better way of living, but also a lot worse. And yeah, I just think 100 Boyfriends is a very honest reflection of a gay man's life, and it does leave you with your jaw dropped at some moments, but it also keeps you hooked. So I would recommend this one. Lastly, for our fiction, we have The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. The protagonist in The House on Mango Street is a young Latina girl growing up in Chicago, and the book is a reflection of her perception on the other people that live in her complex, as well as a critique on American lifestyle. It can be quite heartbreaking at times, but not in an unexpected way. Some of the stuff she talks about is almost just like a, yeah, that is what life is like. But at the same time, it has so many moments where the things that make her happy are the small stuff in life we often take for granted. And I don't mean that in a cheesy way, I mean it in a genuine, there's philosophy behind this book kind of way. I would say The House on Mango Street was one of the first books I read that didn't have a plot. As in, there's motifs and there's themes behind it, but there's no resolution to anything. It's just stories, it's just words, and it's talking and it's experiences, but where does it lead? Not really anywhere. I think for me it was a little hard to get behind that concept because you grow up with arcs, you know, the beginning, you're taught to even make stories that way in school. There's, I don't even remember the names of them anymore. The beginning, rising action, climax, falling action, finale, something like that, right? But this totally destroys that sort of structure. It is purely just stream of consciousness, internal thoughts, and it's all written in little vignettes. Sections smaller than short stories or chapters even. You know, you see that is a section, that is a section. It is definitely worth the read. Moving on to nonfiction, I'm going to show you the best book I read in all of 2021. And that is Disintegrate, Dissociate by Arielle Twist. This is Arielle Twist's debut book, and she is a trans Indigenous woman who is originally from Saskatchewan, who now resides in Nova Scotia. As it is, Indigenous people within Canada are not treated fairly, despite this being their land, and also being a trans woman on top of that has just been struggles. And she talks so candidly about that in her book. I'm not kidding when I say this book broke my heart. Like, I genuinely had to put it down. You see how thin this is? I had to genuinely put it down several times because I just needed to process what she was talking about. It is next level raw, next level vulnerable, and there were 3 distinctive poems I can think of that I won't read because I think they could be quite triggering to some people, but they really made me feel every single emotion. A general angst at her having to experience these things, but also an entire identity crisis. Like, I really started thinking on what my gender identity and my queerness meant to me and how my whiteness enhanced it. And it is an emotional roller coaster. And I think anyone who doesn't regularly read poetry shouldn't start off with this. But if you're someone who already does read a lot of poetry and you understand the weight towards just poetry books in general, this is like, you must, you have to. Next, I have I'm Not Here by Gigi, or G Wong. She is so lovely. We actually live kind of close to each other, so we've talked online and stuff, but this was the first of her books that I've ever read. She's come out with more since, but I'm Not Here is specifically about being a second generation immigrant through her artwork. I'm showing you specifically a page that doesn't have words, so I don't spoil anything. But she's created this reflective moment in her life where she's walking outside with a camera and through the lens having different memories of her family. And it is so beautiful. Genuinely, the way that the illustrations and narration portray this moment in her life, it's done perfect. I don't have a single bad critique. And I don't know, this book just blew me away. All the artistic elements she puts in it to show flashbacks or show emotions she's using. It's all just color theory and the use of space and empty space. It's all concepts I already knew, but she did it in such a genius way. I love it. I would say this is both considered biographical and just a literary graphic novel, but recommendation. Next, I have Less by Rachel Aust. Now, I didn't know Rachel was also a YouTuber. I found that out when I read the About the Author upon finishing it. When I looked up her channel, I watched a few videos and they were really well done. It seemed interesting, but I can't say I know anything about her as a person, really. So as far as I'm aware, she's not a problematic person. I'm saying this from a perspective of, I'm not a predispositioned fan. This is just, I love this book for what it is as a book. As the title says, Less is a visual guide to minimalism, and I picked this book up near the beginning of my minimalist journey. I'm gonna assume most people watching this video don't know me that far back, so as a quick little thing, my family didn't grow up with a lot of money, so whenever we had something, we always kept it, because what if we needed it later? We don't want to have to pay for it again. And this could be anything given to us. It could be even just scrappy garbage things that don't work well. Maybe we could turn it into something. Like, our house was full of stuff we didn't need and didn't use for more of a financial security purpose. On top of that, on one side of my family, my grandparents were hoarders. And I grew up seeing that. Like, if you think of those extreme hoarder shows where there's just mountains of clothes and storage and just random ass things, my grandma's house looked like that. I remember being a kid and like climbing through the mess, feeling like I was finding treasures, only later in life to discover a lot of it was stolen and picked out of the garbage, and it was not a good situation. So when I was in high school, I did a complete 180. I didn't want anything. I was feeling stressed out having stuff in my life, and I had a period where I donated basically everything I owned. So much makeup, clothes, anything sentimental. Like, I wanted to live with nothing. And so the minimalist community is what I gravitated towards. Now, at the time when I was a teenager, it wasn't too big, so there was only a few articles or random YouTube videos about it. And so for a while, I felt kind of alone in it, especially because I wasn't doing minimalism for an aesthetic purpose. I was doing it for mental decluttering as well. You know, detaching from materialism. It was the core of minimalism that mattered a bit more to me. And so once that lifestyle started picking up pace and getting online traction, I found this book and I was like, I've never seen a book about minimalism before. I want to buy it. Plus, the cover's real cute. And to this day, this is still my favorite book about minimalism. I can't stress how well put together this is. It not only talks about ways and strategies to declutter, but it is a whole visual guide on what is necessary to have in your life and what isn't, what you can have multi-uses out of and what you shouldn't. And I genuinely learned a lot from this, and I took a lot of reference from it at the time. Even this one page I have here, it says decluttering the basement, attic, garage, and has a little chart to the side. The start says, has it been used in the last 2 months? If you go yes, you go one way to the chart. If you say no, it goes to another way. Is it seasonally used? Is it sentimental? Like, you have to consider these kinds of questions when you're going through a minimalist process. Now, with all this said, I'm not interested in minimalism to the same degree because I feel like I had a good hold on it. And at some point, I did want to buy more books for my room and a few more pieces of clothing. So I let loose with the rules a little bit. However, I still equally hold so much value to this book because as an adult, it's less about minimalism for me and more about being zero waste. This book has so many parallels to a zero waste lifestyle that it is still equally as relevant to me now. Personally, I think people who label themselves as maximalists aren't very eco-conscious or poverty aware. It's a lot of bragging about things they have, even if they're thrifted, you know, that's a more ethical way to consume, but technically there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. So regardless of however you identify with that, I think it is important to incorporate aspects of minimalism or zero waste into everyone's lifestyle, even if only to a small degree. You know, it's better than nothing. And if you're someone who wants to go full out in that sort of lifestyle, like, fuck yeah, and this book will be amazing for you. And if you're someone who doesn't know where to start or has maybe considered starting and finds it difficult, this book can be of equal value because it's still a very pick and choose book if you make it so. So yeah, that is one of my recommendations. And the very last one is called I'll Fly Away by Rudy Francisco. I love Rudy Francisco. I feel like I always talk about him. He is one of my favorite slam poets in the world. The first book he ever wrote is called Helium, and I actually included it in my 10 favorite poetry books video from a year ago or so. I'll Fly Away exceeded expectations because I loved Helium so much that I was like, can he top that? Yes, he definitely can. I'll Fly Away is it's so good. I wouldn't say it's as heartbreaking as Disintegrate, Dissociate by Arielle Twist, but it still has its own elements of tragic reflections of identity. I mean, he's a black man in America, so obviously the poems about that are pretty brutal, but he also did it in such a way that there was so much empowerment within his marginalization, and there's so much reflection on who he was as a boy in correlation to who the world is now. He also did this completely genius thing where periodically throughout the book there's a word with a definition written exactly like dictionaries do. They're all ambiguous words that mostly no one actually know about, but somehow all of the definitions he put to them were poems in themselves. Every single time he had one of these dictionary definitions, it was a jaw-drop moment. Whether you're into activism or just poetry in general, this book is like, it's a guaranteed love. And so with that said, that is all of the books I have for you today. If you do end up purchasing any of these books, I genuinely would love to know what you think, even if you come back to this video in a year or two. Give me the reviews. I hope you have an amazing day, and I would love to see you in the next video. Like, comment, subscribe, all that shit, and I will see you then. Bye!